A weapon becomes feared when it threatens before you can answer it.
Medieval fear came from many directions, not only from the sword.
To understand medieval fear, you have to look past the weapon that worry on the poems.
These were the weapons that made confidence collapse faster than elegance could save it. Few weapons frightened cavalry and infantry alike more than a disciplined wall of pikes.
The pike terrified not because it was elegant, but because it turned men into a machine of distance.
To cavalry, the pike did not look like a duel. It looked like refusal made solid.
Some weapons are feared simply because they force everything else to negotiate with them first.
The pike was fear turned outward, but it also demanded discipline from within. The crossbow frightened men because it made danger feel mechanical and patient. You did not need to reach the enemy if the weapon could do the reaching for you.
The crossbow was feared not only for wounds, but for hesitation. It terrified because it stored force in advance, then released it with cruel patience. A sword announces itself, but a crossbow often waits where you cannot yet answer it.
Once the fight got close, men often feared blunt honesty more than graceful steel.
A mace was feared because armor could reduce the wound, but not erase the violence.
Some weapons become terrifying exactly where grace and room both disappear.
Men feared the mace because it was less beautiful and more sincere about what it wanted to do.
If the mace spread violence, the hammer tried to focus it into one terrifying question.
It did not need to look elegant, only purposeful.
The stranger the anti-armor weapon looked, the more likely their armor had forced it into existence.
Some weapons were feared because they attacked your position before your body. The bill frightened men because it could drag order out of them.
Some medieval weapons were feared because their shapes announced they were built for a particular cruelty.
Few weapons were more feared for how many answers they offered, once combat grew confused. Men feared the halberd because it could punish different mistakes in different ways.
The halberd often waited just behind the longer points, for the moment panic created opportunity. For armored men on foot, the poleaxe could feel like concentrated bad news. It was feared because it could strike, hook, thrust, and break rhythm against plate.
The poleaxe terrified because it carried too many answers into one close encounter.
At the closest range, men often feared the smallest weapon the most.
The dagger frightened because everyone understood what it was trying to find.
Once a man in armor lost balance and space, the dagger could become the most personal weapon on the field.
The most feared weapon is sometimes the one you see only after all other plans have failed. To men on foot, the lance could be more frightening than the sword ever had time to be.
The lance was feared because it did not arrive as a man, but as a moving system of horse, armor, and speed.
Some weapons dominate one moment, but that moment is enough to define fear. If the sword owned the legend, The spear family owned the battlefield's harder arithmetic.
What made the spear terrifying was not one shape, but how many different forms of fear it could become.
To cavalry, a pike block looked less like men and more like refusal made visible.
A weapon becomes historically terrifying when ordinary people can field it in numbers.
Men often feared system weapons more than symbolic ones.
The most feared weapon changed with distance, armor, terrain, numbers, and what phase of battle had begun.
Medieval men did not fear only one weapon. They feared different weapons at different moments of the same fight.
A fighter's loadout often reveals the problem he expects most.
Medieval terror often came from systems, not from single perfect blades. Men in armor feared what could stop them before their own sword ever mattered.
Real combat is too messy to trust one weapon for every problem.
Battlefields remember which weapons reach the dangerous parts of reality.
Repetition creates reputation, and reputation creates fear before the fight begins.
The weapons men praise are not always the ones that keep them awake.
Often, whatever could reach first, hit harder, stop movement, or finish the fight after you fell.
If fear meant controlling whole fields and cavalry decisions, the pike stands near the top.
If fear meant being threatened before contact, the crossbow deserves its place beside the pike. If fear meant what happened after space collapsed, the uglier tools often became the truest ones.
The sword won the stories, but other weapons often won the fear.